Commander is my favorite format to play, so much so that I keep rambling into this mic and making videos about it. The format just has so much to offer. Multiplayer, unique deck building restrictions, and it doesn't rotate. Personally, I've never played a game of Standard because I just don't like rotating formats. I have immense respect for those original pioneers of the Commander format, especially the late great Sheldon Menery, who invented the format and was head of the rules committee for years. If you want to read more about him here, there are articles on the EDH website, which I will link in the description, and I will be referencing his 2020 Rule Zero article on Star City Games in this video. I'll also have a link to that in the description if you want to read the full article yourself, although it is by no means required reading for this video. One thing I like about EDH is that the philosophy for the format is fascinating. Most Magic formats ban or unban cards based on tournament data and win rates. But that's not really true for Commander. The Rules Committee makes rules and bans cards. The Rules Committee, though, is not run by Wizards of the Coast. It's a totally separate entity. Maybe not totally, since they are connected, but it is separate at least. Cards are banned based on other criteria, such as causing severe resource imbalances, allowing players to win out of nowhere, preventing players from contributing to the game in meaningful ways, cause other players to feel they must play certain cards even though they are also problematic, are very difficult for players to interact with, especially if doing so requires dedicated, narrow responses when deck building, interact poorly with the multiplayer nature of the format or the specific rules of Commander, lead to repetitive gameplay. But I already made a whole separate video about the ban list. If you want to check out that video, I'll put a card here. The philosophy I want to talk about is Rule Zero. It's important to note real quick that Rule Zero has since been removed as an official rule and is under the philosophy portion of the EDH website. According to the 2020 article, Rule Zero, these are the official rules of Commander. Local groups are welcome to modify them as they see fit. If you'd like an exception to these rules, especially in an unfamiliar environment, please get the approval of other players before the game begins. So Rule Zero is essentially, there are no rules and you can do whatever you want. Not quite though. This criticism is actually already addressed in the article. Commander is designed to be a malleable format. We encourage groups to use the rules and ban list as a baseline to optimize their own experience. This is not license for an individual to force their vision onto a playgroup, but encouragement for players to discuss their goals and how the rules might be adjusted to suit those goals. Which makes sense. Like a ship of Theseus, as you replace or change planks of a ship one at a time, eventually it becomes a new boat. And that's the same thing here. If you change or break too many rules, it's a new format at that point. The idea of Rule Zero is for you and your friends to make small changes to the rules to make it better for your playgroup. Like if your friends, for example, wanted to unban Gristlebrand, but you all agreed not to reanimate him or add a once per turn restriction, something like that. Small changes like this are well and good with you and your buddies. Your edited version of Gristlebrand might be a really cool card, but it doesn't really work when you go to your local game store or just any bigger event where there are new or other players. Since every player won't have your special rules, it just doesn't mesh well. This is why, for the most part, people stick to the official rules. Even still, there is often a Rule Zero discussion that happens before games. It can be as simple as asking what power level you're playing at, or discussions about specific cards, play styles, etc. Sometimes people take the Rule Zero conversation pretty far actually, and they'll ask a lot of questions. Does your deck have combos? Does your deck have fast mana? How early can your deck win? All of these can be part of a Rule Zero discussion, to bend and twist the rules in some way to make it a more fair and fun game for everybody. But there are a few issues with this. For starters, it's really easy to opt into something, but harder to opt out. For example, if I bring a deck to my local shop and say, hey, I have an uncard in my deck, is that okay? Then the other players can opt into playing with my rules very easily. They say, yes, I play my deck, we continue onward. Now, if you are going to do this, I would recommend having some card you can replace with that uncard or whatever. In case people say no, but you still want to play the game, you can just easily swap the card. But it can be trickier to opt out of things, which is what I think a lot of players actually are looking for. Many players, especially newer players, will try to ban things outright. Combos, maybe commonly used cards, or very powerful cards. If you go to a shop, it might be difficult to find 3 or more people who adhere to whatever your rules are. One time I went to a shop that banned Sol Ring outright, which was mostly just really annoying, since I had to keep swapping it out for a different card. And while it might not be too hard to find 3 players who don't play combos, you might be excluding decks that would actually be fine to play with. Because banning specific individual cards or individual things like combo or specific archetypes doesn't actually adjust for power level in the same way you might think. A deck that has some 5-card jank combo in it probably isn't going to be significantly more powerful than, let's say, a fully powered deck that has no combos but is playing stacks pieces like Winter Orb or Static Orb. One deck might have a combo and the other deck doesn't, but I would argue a stacks deck is probably going to be more powerful than a random pile of cards that happens to have a combo in it. It also just kind of sucks, like, when you build what you think is a really cool deck, but then some random player at your local game store says, oh, I don't want to play with your deck because it has a combo in it. Or I don't want to play against your deck because it has control pieces or counter magic or any random thing. It just doesn't feel right to me to ask your opponents to change their decks and playstyles to suit you. And that goes back to what was written in the 2020 article. This is not a license for individuals to force their vision onto a player. And I agree with that. Individual aspects of your deck, like budget or combo, don't really tell you anything about your deck's power. You have to look at the whole picture. You can add an expensive card like Jusum Jin to your deck, but it probably won't make your deck much more powerful. So when doing your Real Zero conversation, I feel like more people need to talk about overall power level than specifics. Although that leads me to another issue. There are people who try to bust out like a whole PowerPoint to explain their deck, but usually I just stop them and ask if they're playing low power, mid power, high power, or CDH. I'd rather not know the themes, gimmicks, hidden commanders, whatever you got going on in your deck before the game starts. I'd rather be surprised or figure it out as we go along. It's fun to see Morophon at the other end of the table and just have no clue what they're cooking up. And sometimes it can really surprise you. I was playing up against a Morophon deck once, and when they cast Morophon naming Boar, I was really shocked. And I'm so glad I didn't know that going into the game. Okay, so the 2 big issues with the Rule Zero is that although you can bend and break the rules with your small play groups, it's hard to do that at your local shop. And common rule bends, like opting out of specific things like combos or certain cards, can be difficult to do and sometimes doesn't quite adjust the power level in the same way you think it might. So there are 2 main solutions to this. One is, honestly, just make your deck ready for most anything. Your deck should have a decent mix of versatile removals so that you can destroy artifacts, enchantments, creatures, and also ways to exile graveyards. Generally, if everyone in your playgroup is playing some amount of removal and graveyard hate, it's really rare that a 3 or 4 card plus combo deck is going to actually win for free or out of nowhere. And the more you play with combos, the more you understand what cards are combo pieces, what are commonly used to dig for those combo pieces, and the more you're going to be seeing these quote-unquote out-of-nowhere combos before they actually hit the field. I would recommend keeping your Rule Zero discussion short. Low, mid, high power, or CEDH, which is actually the second solution. CEDH is totally fascinating because it is kind of like a format within the format, except this format just plays by the rules. At the start, I talked about other formats and how that they play cards and ban cards based on power level or win rates, and Commander has this silly philosophy of fun and doing goofy things. But CEDH is none of that. You just play with the ban list and with the rules. There is no Rule Zero. There's no adjustment you make. You just build the best deck you can come up with within the rules of the format. And there are a ton of advantages to CEDH. For starters, there isn't really much salt. In casual tables, I'm sure we've all experienced this, where someone gets really salty because someone played a card or somebody did a combo or somebody did blah 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 X, Y, and Z. None of that happens in CEDH. Everybody knows what they're getting into. You're sitting down, and the other person is going to Winter Orb you. The other person is going to combo off. They're going to blow up your things. They're going to counter your stuff. You already know that, but your deck is built for all of that. And because of that, CEDH is generally a lot less salty and a lot more casual feeling than a lot of casual tables might be. I would highly recommend, if you're a player who really wants to play some powerful stuff, but it doesn't really mesh well with your playgroup to try CEDH. I'm going to put a link in the description to the CEDH deck list database. You don't necessarily have to play one of the decks that are on this list, but these are decks that have performed well at events over the last however many months. And it's a good starting place, because if you show up to a CEDH event with some random high power deck, you're gonna get steamrolled if you're not ready for specific meta decks. Ultimately, I really like Rule Zero. It's a very interesting part of the format that is unlike most other games, and definitely different than every other Magic format. And it's part of why I love Commander so very much. Let me know what you think of Rule Zero in the comments below, how you utilize it in your playgroup, and how it's affected you overall. And hopefully I've convinced at least some people to try out CEDH. It's a ton of fun, I promise. Games don't end on turn 2 like you might think they do. It's very different than what you're expecting. Thank you so very much for watching. Subscribe for more.